Recording is on. So it's back again on this question of mastering of this alien cortex, of not letting it rule us, but the awareness. Is that human agency? Is that really at the root of human agency? Just throwing this out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I'm just a little bit wary of the word mastery because I think that throws us back in with the original problem, is that there's some entity which is controlling something else, which is, that's the characteristic of the alien cortex, is the control narrative, dominance narrative projected in itself in all sorts of ways. But I think, looking at this more from the point of view as it being a misused tool seems more constructive. I mean, as you referred to it as that, and it's and certainly, as you can see, also that's writ very large in society, where we have a lot of amazing things that we've managed to create, and they're generally being used incorrectly or excessively. There's a substantial part of the mess that we're in at the moment, is the misuse of tools, not just internal ones, but external ones.
Yeah, if you look at monkeys, you see, and certain species, but mostly monkeys. But I've seen that in the octopus too. They use objects in the environment as tools, and they have a certain technique that hasn't so far run amok, that has just kept going, and we seem to, like for energy, like the Jevons paradox, we seem to, once we found something, well, then we found a more energy efficient way of using it or doing it. So it's that I think that's the avenue that we follow.
Yeah. I'm just wondering where to take this subject now.
Well, we were in the thing that honestly, I don't like the terrain where we say that we are guilty. I don't like this because it's unproductive, and I don't like the idea. It doesn't ring with me that we are a parasite species that shouldn't have never existed, and that we have no role. And that's where we started this, and that is that is a bit what we were talking about last week.
But another, we might be able to head off in a new direction, because what I'm just thinking of now is thinking of the discussions about terror management theory, and the also the grieving processes, in particular the pleading and denial phase, where we're, and I'm wondering if we're in that at the moment, where we can see the direction in which the civilization and the planet that we're clinging desperately to is not going to be supporting us very much longer. And even here, where we're trying to have a discussion that is a little bit above the ordinary, that we're still in a way scratching around desperately for some way of looking at this that will create a sense of resolution within ourselves. And I'm not so sure that we're going to find that. I mean, of course, this is not to set aside this strictly spiritual way of looking at it. Is sense of transcending the this sort of ego-centered way of looking at things, but I think it's true to say of most people that they haven't reached that exalted stage. So is a lot of this discussion end up being in the realm of trying to come to a position of understanding about this, uh, instead of constantly squirming around. Uh, Sorry, I'd like to be able to develop that a little bit more clearly. I'm not sure that I can. Does anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I think back to Manga Bay and they're kind of piled on reporting about what we are doing to this planet. I think acceptance of that is possible, at least for some of us. uh, but that doesn't, that grows our understanding of the situation, but it doesn't necessarily uh, add to the guilt of us as individuals. It's more like learning about the apartheid system, right? So we can accept that apartheid is a bad system, and now I'm talking about the human apartheid speciesism thing, or the civilized form of human systems. Uh, so understanding that that system is unnatural and unecological, uh, I think is important, and kind of the challenge for everyone here now is to realize that humans are something different as well. We are something else as well. As DB says in the chat, before civilization we were like wolves, running around catching prey and being happy with that. So we have this huge prehistory of being like the other animals and fitting in much better than we do now, and that in many ways that is also our future. Um, so so if we can embrace sort of the natural side of being human, like most of the things, the good things in life are free, is an expression, and most of the good things that we appreciate are also natural and pre-civilized, like food and sex and sleep and community and being happy with other uh, together with other people. uh, I think Sophie used the word last time about communion or something, or being together and having a meal and talking with friends and family. um, those are kind of pre-civilized pleasures also. um, so we I think we can easily put the blame and the guilt on the 10,000-year civilized system, which was hostile to nature in many ways. Many small ways in the beginning, but like my comparison a month ago or something to a primitive kind of flying machine that somebody was testing off a cliff. Uh, uh, he could feel that, okay, this is a big success, for 10 minutes until it crashed to the ground. Then we have this agricultural society that we've been in for 10,000 years now. And it was also crashing to the ground because it was unsustainable. But as these things go, some things that are unsustainable and can't continue, they still take 10,000 years to play out before they crash to the ground. That doesn't mean it was ever sustainable. during those 10,000 years. It just takes a long time to destroy an entire planet.
Yeah, I think too we're at a bit of a disadvantage at this end of history by having this sort of hyper awareness of our predicament. I think if you go back in time, and obviously, other there's even in tribal situations or hunter-gatherer situations, groups would have been wiped out for various reasons, disease or some unexpected thing might have occurred. But now we've got all of this technological assistance to help us understand what the predicament is that we're in, but also as individuals, we've, as part, I think, of the alien cortex package, we've got this sort of hypervigilant mentality that acutely tunes us in to the situation that we're in. And so it magnifies it. I get, well, don't think it needs magnifying. It could hardly be any worse. But I mean, it is a very large thing to be facing. And so, of course, I think we're still not at a point of acceptance with it. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying to do the right thing. But at the same time, I think that people are still squirming around, not in acceptance of this. I think this goes back a bit to what Lord Hugh was saying about his sense of ataraxia, that we're going to go down, but it's a case of the kind of quality of your psychology as that happens. Are you going to go down screaming resistance the whole way, or understanding the nature of what's occurring?
What you're saying, Gary, puts me in resonance with probably what was happening a long time ago when let's say a group of early humans were in a place where they had been for a long time, that they hadn't moved because for any reasons, and their area was starting to be devoid of prey and things to forage, and they were starting to get dirty by their own excrements and stuff like that. So they probably had to move on to another area where they would maybe survive, maybe not. And I mean, it's not very difficult to imagine that. I don't think that is far-reaching. I think it probably did happen and still happening all the time in hunter-gatherers. And you see, when you talk about acceptance, these people also knew when it was time to say, well, we can't go any further. Death is there, and we accept death, and maybe a few are going to go to survive, and the ones that will stay will die. I mean, there is this constantly at the core of animal insect colonies too. There's a moment where you can't go anywhere, and whether it's and things collapse because there is no energy, no food, and the animal world doesn't ask himself all the questions on ataraxia and stuff like that. It just happens. It's just what is. When the human beings, how do we know when they started to deny this outcome of our life, which is death, and tried to not let things happen? So that's where we come to overshoot. I think that's when we come to, at all cost we have to grow, and we have to create cities, and we have to make those big fields, even if we're destroying everything around, and then we'll find fertilizers, so we'll produce more, and then we'll have a surplus. But we're also touching again the denial of death. and away, far away from the acceptance. And in this time of collapse, I feel like we're a little bit like these insects who are running around knowing that they're going to just go and they're going mental, but then suddenly they stop and they see that it's what is, but we're not. We're clinging on to our reasoning alien codex or whatever in form of intellect and despair and denial of death in the throes of what is happening. But that's what is happening to our species. We didn't see, and without any guilt in that, it's just what happened. We didn't see the time when we had to let go.
Yeah, I think you're making a great point, Sophie, about the big game ending or being depleted just before human settlements or human agriculture happened. So that is a part of prehistory that is being studied more and more now. And I think to a degree you could say that everything from finding out how to keep a fire and start a fire to sharpening those rocks to use for scraping the skins and also to use for arrowheads and stuff. All of those kinds of technological interventions, they were sort of a very slow start to the eco collapse that happened after agriculture started. So it's a very, very slow start, almost like the start of the melting of the Greenland ice sheet. It doesn't go very fast in the beginning, but then it really comes down hard. So yeah, I think it's important to remember that overshoot started before agriculture, in a sense, because we hunted all the big animals to extinction. It's kind of like what did we do then? What did we do when we hunted all of those to extinction? Well, we just found out we could deplete the earth more efficiently with with growing the fields and burning the forests and all of these horrors.
There is a question. There's a question to you, Gary. I just wanted to take your attention to it. There's a question from
okay. Sorry, because I can't see.
You talked about completing the mental map when you and him talked about Kundalini awakening. What do you think he meant by that, Gary?
Completing the mental map. Look, I'm sorry, I can't bring the sense of that to mind. Completing the mental map. I'm sorry, I just can't think what we would have been referring to. Can you got any? Can you add something to that, DB? Just to.
He says no worries. He says no worries, Gary, on the comment.
Okay, yeah. No, I was just going to make the point about just Torsten was talking about the killing off all the megafauna, and this goes back, because a lot of people say, oh, these early hunter-gatherer societies and how wonderfully in tune with nature and all the rest of it they were, and but I think you could argue that a lot of them went through a stage where they were in overshoot, where they did kill off a lot of the large animals, and they probably also faced a bottleneck and problems with sustaining themselves. And I think in some of those cases, that is where the so-called, the sort of native people's wisdom that we see the remnants of now in our time came from that, because they saw that they had made a very bad mistake in the way they were interacting with the natural world in terms of destroying these animals. And it was a wake-up call for them. And this is not my idea. I just don't know where I read it or got it from now. But that this was at the point where a lot of these early human groups became much more environmentally engaged, aware, sensitive, and sort of saw themselves as custodians of their environment and participants in everything that was going on, rather than just purely using it any way they want to extract their needs from it. And that is that process of uh, learning that wise lesson is something that current civilization hasn't gone through. It's going through it now. Whether it will emerge on the other side of it any wiser, or whether it just won't emerge on the other side of it at all, remains to be seen, I guess. I mean, it's just going back to what I was saying about the extinction of the megafauna. It's was particularly striking in Australia, because there's just nothing here at all. It was completely destroyed by the original sort of settlers here, and so was vast amounts of forest and all the rest of it. Uh, but if you now look at the kind of wisdom of these people, they've got a very wise outlook on the natural environment. But obviously, at one stage in their distant past, they didn't. So they had the opportunity, they had the good fortune, I guess, to have made a mistake and come out on the right side of it. And we're looking at this. Are we going, this state that humanity is in at the moment? Is this an opportunity that anyone's going to recognise, or will it just be lost on the way down the drain hole?
Yeah, about that, because now we're kind of discussing to go into the fourth industrial revolution, also called the Green New Deal. And the way I understood Sophie, we had a chance when we figure out that we killed off all the megafauna before we started agriculture. Should we sort of take a hint and downsize our human enterprise, or just carry on and double down? And I think we know the answer now, and we're also going to double down this time in the 2020s, when we know all of these things about our destruction of the natural environment and how we are depleting the climate and stuff. We're still going to charge ahead and build a entirely new industrial fourth generation society, which even mainstream critics are saying it won't be ecological at all. It will just be sort of the emperor's new clothes, or just so some green furnishing in the edges of the same thing. Yeah, so it seems that we are not taking the hint as a human society even now, which I think is pretty depressing.
Yeah, I suppose there's always, as we were saying a couple of weeks ago, uh, that like doubling down on this and pursuing fourth industrial revolution or whatever you want to call it, still might um, actually cause industrial civilization to go down more quickly, just by virtue of its own insane excess. And that could be the best way by accelerating its own stupidity. And so what's our role? Instead of agency, looking at where we do have agency, which is within ourselves, instead of trying. And I think this comes back to Lord Hugh's emphasis on, getting out from the domination of this part of our psychology, the alien cortex, is bring agency back to where you have it, which is within yourself, and work there. Given that the civilization that's supporting us is going to go down probably regardless, and so what is really going to count in the end is uh, each person's well, two things are going to count. Of course, you obviously want as much of the natural environment to escape as possible, but I think that's just going to be a thing that's just got to occur of its own accord. And then there's within us is how is each individual person going to go down. Are we going to just recognize that this was unfortunate, that it probably couldn't have gone any other way, and uh, um, yes, to continue to do the right thing just because it's the right thing to do, but also to be in some state of equanimity within oneself. As DB wrote, what did you just say, DB, about Blake back up there, um, uh, who died singing and something or other? I can't see it now.
Yeah,
Uh,
he died
yeah,
singing hymns and stuff is what they
yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, even
This
in
is a
the ripeness video, Hugh talked about thinking about what it means to complete your own life and then do that.
yeah. I think that's where we're at, to attend to that, because that's where we stand a chance of having some agency. So yeah, that's just
Well, that's where
my
we,
thought there.
and to add to what you're saying, Gary, that's where we add to this beauty of nature and and nature's terrible nature. They say nature maybe is not aspect. Um, it is huge and terrible. It is not. We must stop having this romantic, emotional view of life and saying, "Oh my God, this is so terrible," and we're going down. And it's this acceptance is also in flow. It's the power of Kali, and we're her husband lying down, and she's on top of us. Like we are so much. Our anthropocentric view is so corrupting everything that we're not in flow. We're not in line. If a few of us survive, so much the better, because of what we talked about last week about our place in this whole creation, maybe our role that we don't even know, but it has to be one. And does there have to be a role? It's just what is. But the humans don't seem to want to consider the terrible nature of the universe, of the amount of destruction that you need to have life, and of the amount of death you need to have life. And if you're looking at astrophysics, if you're looking at everything, if you look at the churning of the swell in the ocean to bring up the plankton, and everything is in destruction and reconstruction all the time. And That's what
Yeah,
nature is.
yeah, that reminds me of a conversation I had with like a nihilistic person. Their claim is that, the universe is bad, terrible, and unfit and to live in and whatever. And I said, "Well, why are you saying that? You're in your room, comfortable right now, breathing, you have food, everything's fine. Why you, saying the universe is bad?" Makes no sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the focus that Gary mentioned on our inner life and our agency about what to do with our inner constitution and stuff is very interesting and very important. One of the things I have in mind is that to a lot of people, like the wife of the protagonist in The Road by Cormac McCarthy, who chose to just go out, not go out into the street, but go out. I think uh, the what ends when in civilized society ends is the concept of the future that we're talking about maybe 20 years ago. The future as a bright and technological and positive thing. So when that story ends for most people, for normies and stuff, it very quickly turns into something that they don't want to be a part of, and so kind of preparing ourselves for a totally new outlook, and also a world where there are no longer any Netflix or any new books coming out every year, and no distractions, no bullshit news on the TV or the computer. Um, but I would say that nature, nature becomes 100% of your daily occupation. Nature and finding water and food and stuff. And that used to give people meaning for 10,000 years at least, or 2 million years. And I think Ted Kaczynski talks about the loss of meaning in our societies because everything is just so easy. And I'm feeling this very, very strongly these days in June. I feel I need to go and catch my own food. It's just an urge that comes back in summer, I think. So we it's not like we're orphans when we go back to nature. It's more like we rediscover meaning, and I don't subscribe to the idea of nature as a big, brutal, godforsaken place. Really, it's more like finding out that she has lots of places to sleep, and she has beautiful meadows and little creeks with trout and fish, and it's a beautiful place, really. But it's kind of like when you have these doubling down normies who just want to go on and buy a bigger house and more houses and 2 cars, and going from that perspective or that outlook and into a dark wall of trees without streetlights. you know uh, yeah, it's kind of two worlds colliding, right?
yes, you
I
are.
think
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say so right about meaning, about the meaning. Go ahead, Gary.
yeah, I'll talk about that in just a second. But just what Torstein was saying um, is, what we've lost is in not being in nature like that is that we're not. Nature is the thing which produces the sense of awe which is essentially a space of stillness, and we've really removed ourselves from circumstances in which we would experience awe. It comes down to a second or two of some violent movie on television instead of sunset, instead of watching a flock of birds, or something with a lot more extension in time and space and depth and everything to it. And it's just thinking while Torstein was talking there that it's a great pity that a kind of a paradox, contradiction, I guess, in a way, that it's been just in really the post-war period that we've entered into this really state of no return that we've created, basically with carbon dioxide emissions. But it's also just been in that period of time, post-war period, that we also entered into the period of when most people within Western societies became more or less in one generation disconnected from anything natural. Everything came from the shop, and generally just about everybody stopped having a garden in their backyard and these kind of things. So we entered into this realm of alienation, and we're basically only one generation into it, and it's such a pity that if we didn't have this really one generation that's lived its entire life in this alienated state, we could possibly, we would be having a very different conversation, I think. And it's a shame, because it's in terms of time, in terms of history, it's such a short period that just crossed a line, I think. And I just want to go back before Torstein was talking about what Sophie said of Kali dancing there. I think the important thing there is that Kali didn't intend to kill Shiva, and didn't kill and didn't intend to kill Shiva. So whilst Kali was formidable as a force of, I think, Sophie, you were sort of likening that to the Mother Nature in terms of Kali. So this is a great formidable thing, but it's not necessarily. It doesn't. It might mean death, but it doesn't mean total death and complete annihilation. So I just want to add that little bit about Shiva, and Sophie also mentioned the in that little bracket about the anthropocentric view, and George Socrates sort of questioning about our purpose. And there's one thing that I do think is our purpose, or even if you don't want to use the word purpose, because it's probably a bit of a fraught word, use the word, what was our accomplishment? What have we got to show, so to speak? And this is something that Hugh did mention once, I remember. And we did touch on this last week in terms of consciousness, I think, and the consciousness of animals we were talking about. And I think that the one thing that we have accomplished, not as a personal accomplishment, but just as human beings, is the possibility of is the existence of this self-reflective consciousness. That we know that we're conscious, and this is something that we can think about as a subject in its own right. That we're aware of what we've got, and in the spiritual perspective, we even take that one level further, where we're not just aware that we're aware, but we're aware of the awareness that is aware. And this puts us out on a kind of a pinnacle, I think, that, I mean, people can shoot me down if they want to, but I don't think animals have got to that pinnacle of the added layers of awareness. And I think that is our accomplishment, that has been that is what we demonstrate, that nothing else has demonstrated. And in a way, what that means is that we're more or less we're the eyes and ears of God. That we're the way that God can appreciate creation, because of our added levels of consciousness. And I think that is our thing, that is unique. And yeah, I mean, obviously it's not without its problems, because you can see the mess that we're in. But it's at the one hand, it's got us into problems. I think because not enough people have taken it to the next level of spiritual awakening. Of spiritual awakening is why we have ended up pursuing doggedly this path of self-destruction. It's evidence of the fact that only some of us have really realized the full potential of human beings. Hugh did say there at one stage, what a tragedy it would be if that was lost for eternity, if all of the human beings went extinct. It could take billions of years before anything else arose that could recapture that kind of consciousness. It may never happen again. It could be lost for eternity. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just like to add to what you said, Gary, about our generation learning so little from our parents' generation. I think it's the worst. It's the worst case of not putting forward our survival skills. Skills for surviving without a plastic bank card in all of human history. And it's amazing that coincides with the one time that we really need to all the skills in our toolbox to sustain ourselves after all the shops
Yeah, I mean,
closed
what
for
a
the
pity
last
that
time. Yeah. So
we've lost it just at the point where we need it.
Yeah. So it's a very, very bad timing. And then I would just connect that to something you said after that, Gary, and that was that certainly no animal or plant, but mostly animal, no other animal forgot to pass on their skills to their offspring, and that is only us doing that. And I would like to use that as a contrast to what you're saying about us being so positively different, because I think just that fact that we didn't pass on anything about how to survive in the wild over this last generation, that kind of from the other perspective, that kind of nullifies all all the positive exceptions that humans can boast about, because yeah, no fox or wolf would certainly give birth to a litter of kids without learning them and teaching them anything about how to survive in this thing.
Yes, absolutely, Tostin. Survival tools not transmitted from a generation to another are really the negation of our will to survive, basically, isn't it? It's and another thing that Gary, I wanted to add to what came to my mind actually when Gary was talking about our our change in connection with our world around us is that that talk that I think it's Bob posted it to Reddit last week by Ivan Illich on water, and he was talking. His speech was about was in a conference about water, and he was expanding on the fact that we're using tons of water to flush out our excrements, and that
It's a cleaning fluid, he said.
yeah, exactly. And I think that was great. It was actually very edifying, and I've often used that image to talk to people about our use of water. But I was very interested in it, and Bob very kindly put in a comment a link to the full talk. And in the second part, or the third part, I can't remember, of his talk, he touches on to the subject of when humans, when the visual took prevalence over the smell and the audition in our recent history, and it comes roughly at the time, he said that really people were surrounded by an enormous amount of smell stimulations up until the 17th, 18th century, that clean people didn't wash the same way, people didn't wash away body odors, that they were surrounded with the smell of their excrements quite a lot, which were actually probably good indicators, because they were not just negative signals. That those things are very important, and our primate brain and a primitive brain needs all these things. That actually it's probably reptilian with the smell. And audition too, because that's a very ancient. And it seems that in our recent history, the visual has taken prevalence, and the visual meaning, look at how we are mesmerized by screens, and how you appear, etc. But we have kind of eliminated the smell out of our lives by various methods, and that is also the negation of a survival tool that is so important. And we don't even realize what are the unconscious messages that smells carry to our behavior and to our health, and the auditory. Because if you have ever hunted, or if you have ever been in nature to look for animals, if your audition as well as your smell, it's not just your visual skill. If you want to recognize a fruit or a mushroom, I mean, you're using every part of your body, and we have sacrificed this gradually when we start. And Illich, to go back to Illich, I would advise anyone to listen to it's not a very long thing. The link is on Reddit, because it's very edifying, and the way we've treated water and the way water is used is, oh my God. Yeah.
One can say our use of water is pretty shitty.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty. Yeah, so it is.
And yeah, like the whole, I always come back to that Wall-E movie with what's a technical civilization is turning people into. Fuck, you know what movie I'm talking about, right? Wall-E, where they're all riding around in their floaty chairs in
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, yeah. That was an excellent cartoon. Very good. Mm.
I was thinking while you were talking, Sophie, about this transferal to the visual precedence over smell and sound. That I think the prevalence of writing and reading would have pushed us a lot more towards the visual prevalence as well. And he was also in that talk, Illich. I didn't listen to the longer one. I haven't heard that yet. I listened to the short one, but he did mention this shift beginning around I guess the Renaissance era, 1700s approximately, and but you see that also coincides with the beginning of the beginnings of industrialization, where we would have been creating smells which people didn't want, from burning coal, for instance, And also, you know, with the invention of machinery, which was making noises that we didn't want. So for the first time, we were creating new sensory assaults, which were particularly noticeable via smell and hearing. Um, and so we got writing on the one end, perhaps pulling us towards the visual, and the kind of what's the word? Sorry, I've forgotten that. I'll think of it in a minute. But you know, the sort of offending of the sense of smell and hearing, pushing us away from that all the time. You know, in fact, when I listened to Illich talking about that, I was just thinking of myself living here in a busy area, and you know, most days of the week I wear my noise cancelling headphones all day, just simply because if I can get the noise level down a little bit, it stops my mind from being drawn to the traffic and the construction sounds. I feel a little bit freed up, you know, to get away from the constant demand of the sound of civilization. And I think it was a book I was reading about Ludwig Wittgenstein and the famous philosopher. And he was talking at one stage in his book about what kind of music he liked. And he was, you're talking about a person who was like probably in his 20s in World War One. So, and he was saying that he didn't like the music of his time because it had too much of the sound of machinery in it, you know, regular. And he was talking about not popular music, more of, you know, fine music, classical music, that kind of thing. He came from an extremely wealthy family, had a very refined upbringing. But I remember him lamenting the fact that the industrialization was even coming through in serious musical compositions, that it was having an influence. It's rather strange. The other day, sometimes on the radio stations I listen to, they play jazz musics. I mean, it's lots of different jazz, but you know, I noticed that a lot of American jazz around, like say from the 1930s, 1940s, but not confined to that. A lot of that music has got a beat and has got trumpet sounds or saxophone sounds that appear to be mimicking either railroad sounds or car horns or traffic noises. When you listen to it, that these people are subconsciously embedding industrial civilization in music. You could see it coming out, and so I'm just putting that forward as a further example of the kind of mortification of the sense of hearing, certainly. And of course, you know, we've got the mortification of the sense of smell. You know, you walk out your door, it's a nice fresh morning, and you know, the birds are chirping and the sun's coming up. But when you breathe in the air, you just get the smell of the exhaust of a couple of cars that just went past, you know. So you become rather reluctant to invest much in your sense of smell and your sense of hearing.
Yeah, we've been commenting there on the side there, talking about these things and about the fact that negating. I wrote something like negating our signals, the signals from our body, is an illness. When the moment we start to hide our audition and our smell, we are already on the path of destruction or self-destruction, really, because these are tools. These are been given to us by, you know, that's how we are. That's what we're made of, and it is part of the demise of our civilization to just negate all these signals. And this actually goes back also to medicine, symptomatic treatment, for example. Like you have a symptom, so you erase it. You know, you have anxiety, depression, you give a tablet. you have I don't know, pain. You give a painkiller. You don't even live and understand the pain and go through it and go to the root of it. It's just it's this same the same path. Negating, no, it's not there, it doesn't exist, it's hmm.
Yeah, well, the disconnection from our senses, and it's paralleling our disconnection from nature, and it's feeding back into it, which takes us back really right to the beginning of where we began. So I'm just wondering, we're almost at the end of the next recording thing. Does anyone want to make some more comments, or should we wind it up soon?
I could probably do a comment when it comes to the senses. I feel like people that are more living in their head and away from their senses, um, I don't know, they seem more irritable in a way and more susceptible to trauma and pain and stuff. Like, for instance, a couple weeks ago now, I was riding my bike and some guy's dog, is a little dog, ran up and bit me on the leg. The teeth ain't go in my skins, but it did hurt a bit. So I stopped my bike and I went over to the guy's house and I was like, "Hey, don't worry, I'm not going to press charges, but your dog bit me." And he didn't believe because I was acting all nice. I'm like, "No, he bit me right here. See, there's a welt. Just make sure your dog is locked up, please." And then I went on my way, and the guy did not believe me that 'cause I guess you expect somebody to be ranting and raving when they get bit by a dog, but it's like, even if the teeth punctured my leg, like, I wouldn't freak out. I feel like people that are alienated from their bodies freak out and overreact to stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar experience riding the bike, um, and the dog actually did bite me fairly badly. But uh, I think a bit like you, there was not going to be any mileage to be had out of ranting and carrying on about it.
Yeah, because
In
I
fact,
don't think
the guy had not been he didn't have the dog on a leash in a place where it should have been, and he actually couldn't get the dog to come back to him. I got the dog to come back.
oh,
it
shit.
was it was
Yeah,
all rather
but
ironic. I think like you, I got a bit of an affinity. I might not have a wolf affinity, but I got an affinity with dogs, and it came to me. I didn't have too much trouble getting it to come to me. It was curious that it wouldn't go to its own owner. But we got it on a leash. It was quite a nice dog. It's just that the poor thing just absolutely freaked out and just couldn't cope with somebody on a bicycle. It
yeah,
seemed to be, you know,
yeah, it's probably the sound of the chain when you're pedaling. I've seen a couple well, I've heard a couple dogs in my neighborhood behind their fences freak out when I drive by on my bike. I think it's the
mm,
sound of the chain because their ears, I
mm,
think, with canines, it's their nose is their primary scent, and then their second is their hearing. So, and their hearing is way better than ours, like magnitudes better. So, how the bike chain pedaling sounds to us, it might be like I don't know, someone clacking stuff on your door super loud. Yeah. Oh, dog whi
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
shit. Okay, yeah. Torstein said chains are like a dog whistle. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes
But
sense.
I think our smell and our, maybe I'm not sure about our hearing, but I think our smell and our senses were much stronger, and that we have evolved to gradually have them eroded by various factors that are not just evolutionary, but probably also environmental. Um, but there is different grades for example, I know for myself, if we were talking about our experiences, my sense of smell has always been, since I was a child, enormous. Like I could sniff some things in the woods. I've used my smell I smell things at a distance, and I've even used it in my work because I could detect certain illnesses. in the hospital, particularly when I would go near a bed with my nose. You know, and it made me think about this thing because I was comparing it with other people that I knew around me, and they were saying, "What are you on about?" So I read a bit about this, and first there are people who've got, you know, senses more developed, like that's for sure, and also it has diminished in time. It has become an accessory sense. So I suppose that the way the plasticity of the brain works is that if an area is not stimulated enough, you know, it's just. And if you're not taught young too, I suppose there's also an apprenticeship to all sorts of things that are, and it's the same probably with audition. And also, audition has been greatly damaged by city life and constant exposure to noise, as Gary was saying. You know, living in an urban area, you don't realize. I realize it because I live in a very quiet place. Except for the wind, there's no sound and birds. But as soon as I go into a city, I just get really overwhelmed by the noise, and you don't realize it when you live in it for a long time. But it's just it's enormous. It's I don't know how much decibels, but it's just horrible.